Attention startup leaders. Are you strapped for time but hungry for strategic insights? Introducing Managed Chaos, your go-to podcast for navigating the startup world in less time than your morning commute. Join us as we share expert advice, real-world examples, and actionable strategies to help you scale your business, allocate resources effectively, and achieve visionary results. Tune into Managed Chaos and join a community of like-minded innovators on the path to entrepreneurial success.
Welcome to Managed Chaos, the podcast where we give you the startup business rundown in less time than it takes you to get to work. I'm Katrina Purcell.
And I'm Rachel Anderson.
And today we're going to do something a bit different.
Yep, that's right. I'm so excited about this because today we're pausing our conversations on the business rundown and we're talking about what we see coming in the industry of business in the next half year.
Exactly. So today we're going to kind of share our takes on what we see as key business trends to be looking for in the second half of 2024. Will we be right? Will we be wrong? Who knows? Tell us in the comments wherever you're watching or listening. But let's jump right in. So Rachel, what do you see as the top 3 trends to look for?
Okay, so these are my forecasts. These are my 3 big things that I think we're going to see a lot more of or start seeing in the second half of 2024. So first of all, this one I don't think is any surprise. We've been teetering sort of on this conversation for at least the last year, if not a little bit before that. We started seeing it in early 2023, and that is inflation. So inflation, I think, is going to continue to be a problem for businesses and especially impactful for smaller businesses that have less run ramp or smaller overall budgets. So, in the last few months, we've seen a few key business leaders, like, for example, Warren Buffett, following some of their typical steps that they do for recession planning. There's a lot of pulling out cash from their different portfolios, getting kind of a little bit more liquid so that if something happens, they have that capital ready. And so I don't think that necessarily says, for sure we're going to see a recession, but I think that definitely gives us an indicator of these kind of seasoned professionals seeing signs that there is potentially going to be some cash flow problems. So does that mean recession? Does that mean inflation? We're not sure, but I think for sure we're going to keep seeing some sneaky layoffs on bigger businesses and tighter budgets, even if it's just because of that unknown. So for SMBs and startups, I would probably focus on getting efficient and really optimizing your spending. Look at your budgets and figure out what are the mission critical things that you need to do to really push forward on your finances, push forward on getting customers and maintaining those customers. And as a side note, fractionals, which are C-suite members, both Katrina and I are those are really a good option for this. If you have different hiring needs from an executive perspective, fractionals can give you a lot of kind of budget cuts. They can be a little bit cheaper potentially. They can have more specific expertise. They can have some outside perspective. So that can also be applied to other extended hires or external hires. So it doesn't have to just be in your C-suite, but that's a great example of ways that smaller businesses or startups can look creatively to be efficient and optimize their spending. And that also can be applied to process alignment or even AI. So that's the first trend I really think that we're going to keep seeing. The second is that I think overall, there's going to be increasing revenue with product launches. So what do I really mean by that? I mean, there is, of course, money to be had as you grow and grow your portfolio with new products or offering services, etc. But I think because of the tightening of the budgets, the potential question of where the market's going, the strengthening of your existing portfolio is going to be more important than expansion. So think about it like, how can I make the things that I already do better and more solid so that people can't leave or don't want to leave because I'm so necessary, over becoming more diversified and having more options, but those options maybe are buggy or not quite as proven or tested, or maybe you don't have case studies for those. So really think about your long-term finances. Are you a multi-year payment model, and therefore you can kind of predict where your revenue is going to come in the next, not just months, but years? Or do you have a per device model or sort of a as you go model. And you can start seeing if people are pulling out, right? So you're looking at some of those markers for strengthening your portfolio and figuring out how you're going to really respond. So making your base strong and really focusing on that can be an excellent way to increase revenue over time, even through times of uncertainty. And just as a side note there, I think customer experience is really important. Really investing in how your customers interact with you as a brand can be incredibly important and really a key component of loyalty. And that loyalty is not easily broken, even in hard fiscal times. So that's my second one, is really get good at your base. And then finally, this one is really seen a lot in the marketing world. So I think we're going to see it just blow up in the next 6 months, probably even a year. But that's personalization. So personalization now is really critical. And we have so many tools to be able to do personalization on a massive scale. And so everyone now in our general world with social media and the influencer age and the content creation age, everyone is sort of used to noise. So how do you cut through that noise? That is personalization. That's the way you get through. And so I think we're going to see the rise of that with AI technology, with other platforms that are coming and kind of scheduling to come, that I see in some of the expansion portfolios. And then there's a lot of different ways that you can do this, whether it's fully automated, it's one-to-one personalization from your sales team. It could be full-scale marketing campaigns. There's so many options. And truly, personalization is now an entire strategy on its own. It's not just a tactic anymore. But I think we'll see a lot more of it in the upcoming months as people figure out some of these new tools available to them and start taking note of that to be really more customer-centric.
It's so great. The first 2 points that you mentioned are very related, right? So for inflation, you mentioned that companies might be tightening budgets and that for SMBs, they should look at doing things more efficiently, which means that you need to be concerned that your customers might be looking to cut budgets and make sure that your product is really useful for them and that it's providing them a lot of value to ensure that you're able to retain those customers. And it becomes so much more important. And I think we had a whole podcast on retaining versus getting new customers. So I'm sure that the listeners can go take a peek there. And then personalization, I agree, is definitely going to become a lot more prevalent as we go. Even in the nonprofit space, they're starting to look at how you personalize user journeys of your members. How do you understand, how clicking on something impacts them, or how when they attend a workshop, what do they do with the outcomes from that workshop? And so I think in all facets, it's definitely going to become something bigger.
Yeah, I agree. I think that a nonprofit workspace is actually a perfect case study of where I think most other businesses are going to catch up to that perspective, which isn't always the case. A lot of times the other businesses influence nonprofit, but in this case, I think they're ahead of the curve.
Very true. All right. So my 3, the first one is not going to surprise anyone. It's AI, not quite from the perspective of sort of process and automating your processes and the chat GPTs of the world necessarily, but more so from how startups are popping up around AI or trying to start to use machine learning and apply it into their products. We've seen an uptick in funding for companies that are using AI or that have AI in the title even. And so I think that trend is definitely going to continue through the end of this year and probably into next year. I would venture to guess it's sort of like blockchain was so big, a few years ago, and now it's all about AI. Cybersecurity is another thing I think is going to become a much bigger thing. I think it's becoming already and has been for a lot of the larger companies, but I think it's going to become something that smaller companies need to start to consider. I think in the past, smaller companies felt like as long as I'm using the big name players, my data is fine. But you need to start to think about how you're integrating the data between those systems and what kind of connections you're using, and ensuring that your customer data in particular, especially if you're collecting any kind of personal information or data that needs to be protected based off of various privacy laws, which are getting more strict, is protected, and that there's no ability for hackers to kind of come in and take that data, or even for someone to accidentally send the data somewhere where it shouldn't go. So I think cybersecurity also on a personal level. So we've seen a few startups pop up that are really actually more concerned for personal cybersecurity. So if you think about it, if you're an influencer or, a celebrity or a, someone who could be the target of personal hacking, and someone who might want to try and hack into your social media accounts or things like that. I am sure mine is perfectly safe. The other thing,
absolutely,
yeah, the other thing is going to be nearshoring or even onshoring of tech resources. So I think we originally saw a lot of people go to offshoring. The challenge there is that a lot of people chose the same places, right? So you're seeing a lot of folks went to the same cities in India. And now you're starting to see a lot of issues either finding talent or getting talent to actually walk in the door. So they'll accept the job, but then there's normally a 2 to 3 month waiting period. And by the time it becomes time for them to start, they're actually not starting. They're either remaining at their other company or they have found something else. And so it's becoming very competitive. We've also seen some other common areas of offshoring in Eastern Europe start to have conflicts and issues, right, with being able to have internet connectivity or just not being stable enough to ensure that they can get and deliver projects. So I think a lot of companies are starting to look more into Latin America. You've got a few companies that are actually setting themselves up as sort of brokers to, find the talent in Latin America and connect it to US-based companies. I think there's a lot of advantages there, time zone wise, language wise. There's also a lot of opportunity in Latin America for this to kind of blow up into something pretty cool if this trend continues. And so I think there's definitely a lot of opportunity there. I'm interested to see how it will play out over the rest of this year and probably early into next year as you start to think about co-locating teams, making sure that you're getting teams that have similar skill sets. Certain regions are known for some skill sets. And how can companies start to make that work if they've got engineering groups that are doing certain things in different countries, in different time zones? So we'll see how that all plays out.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting trend marker that you kind of brought up. I was talking to a director several months ago at this point, but I was talking to a director whose team largely was based in some of those Eastern European countries, and it entirely halted the plans that they had. They had to completely redo their roadmap, and there was a lot of uncertainty for a really long time. And I know that there's still a lot of uncertainty on how much can really be done. So that shift of workforce can really have global impact. I mean, your examples are perfect, like internet connectivity. I mean, we really underthink about or maybe take for granted the ease of access that we have being US based. But that's, going to be a consideration in other places. And how does time zones shift working cultures and business cultures? I also think that and the AI component are a really interesting pair, because I also see, before AI blew up, and I think I read a statistic the other day where by 2026, we're expected to have $300 billion invested in AI from an investor perspective, not just like general capital, but like per year. And so anyway, like that's not going away. But before that really bloomed, offshore or nearshore contracting was really the way that we automated some of these things for the people that then would implement stateside. But now with AI, everything has shifted so much that people stateside can kind of do some of those things for what executives see as cheaper, even, right? Free. We know nothing is free. There's time, there's resources, there's effort, but this like free idea, but then also there's mass scale that can still happen if you outsource. So it's such an interesting conversation. And I feel like those two, I'm very curious about how those two specifically are going to affect each other, even in the next 6 months, as we watch.
Definitely. So at the end of the year, we'll have to do a recap, see how we did, and then give our 2025 predictions.
Absolutely. I can't wait. Well, that is today's episode. Let us know if you're listening or watching what you think the trends are. Did we nail it? Do you think we missed a bunch of things? Make your comments, make your predictions, and then together we can see if we're right. We hope that you click that follow and subscribe button so that we can see you all next time on the Managed Chaos podcast.
This was another informative episode of Managed Chaos, the podcast for startups. You can find us on all of your favorite podcasting apps, as well as on Instagram and YouTube, where we are at Managed Chaos Podcast. For additional resources or to continue the conversation, you can find Katrina Purcell and Rachel Anderson on LinkedIn.